podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
On a beautiful run through the park on a pleasant day, you can easily get lost.
No! She didn't kill him.
Huh? In your true crime podcast.
It was the pool guy. So obvious.
Whatever motivates you works for us. It's all about letting your run be your run. And Brooks is here for every runner, doing the research and sweating the details to create gear that works for you. It's your run. Brooks, run happy.
This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest way to play season-long fantasy football. Underdog Fantasy sets your perfect lineup at the end of each week, so no management and no Tuesday nights on the waiver wire. All you do is the most fun part. Draft the best team and win cold, hard cash. Play now at UnderdogFantasy.com, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100 if you use code SPOTIFY.
Hello and welcome to another Podlet live from New York. I say live, of course it's not live, it's the whole point of podcasting, but I am in New York and I am alive, which is something I think we can all be thankful for, one way or another. I appreciate I owe you lots of content and lots of news. I'm going to start with what took place today. I'm recording this late on Monday night New York time, which actually by the time I record this, and certainly by the time you listen to it, most of you will have got up on Tuesday. It would be hard for you to listen to it without having got up. Anyway, point is, it's very late here, and Marin Cilic and Carlos Alcaraz have still not finished. And in fact, as we speak, it looks like they're going to 5 sets. I don't know if I've ever seen a tennis match that goes into a 5th set at 1:45 in the morning. Somehow it doesn't seem fair, but that is what is happening. Let's start with what took place earlier today. I'm going to start with Rafa Nadal. I actually want to apologise in advance for talking more about men's tennis in this podlet than maybe is equitable. But the reality is that over the last 2 days, having talked a lot about Serena last week and about the women's game, the last 2 days the men's draw has come alive, really for the first time in the fortnight, and it has dominated the agenda. And it is all anyone wants to talk to me about, so I thought I should talk about it as well. I will talk about Sunday night's events in due course, but I'm going to start with the stuff that's freshest in my mind, which is what I've just witnessed, and that is Frances Tiafoe beating Rafael Nadal in 4 sets to reach his first ever US Open quarterfinal, only his second Grand Slam quarterfinal ever, and it's a great story. For people who don't know Frances Tiafoe's story, his parents were immigrants from Sierra Leone, and his father, Francis Senior as everyone calls him, I think his name technically is Constant, but everyone knows him as Francis Senior, came over here and worked in construction in Maryland on a tennis centre. And when they finished, he started working at a tennis centre as a sort of security guard, and he ended up living at the centre, and little Francis and his brother lived there for the next 11 years, as far as I can tell, and started having a hit and playing a bit of tennis and impressing the people who were coaching there, and the rest, as they say, is history. And all of a sudden, this kind of great immigrant story, and I think it's really important to tell positive immigrant stories, because the media as a whole, and I know I'm part of the media, but I think other parts of the media tell a lot of negative immigrant stories. This is an amazing one. Frances Tiafoe is into the quarterfinal of his home Grand Slam, and let's not forget, his parents may have come here from Sierra Leone, but he is American, and proudly so, and the kind of most stereotypical American you can imagine in some ways. He was so delighted after he won to have been playing in front of his favourite basketball player, which is Bradley Beal, who I believe plays for the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards are not very well liked, I believe, or at least don't have a lot of fans. If you are listening and you're a Washington Wizard fan, then tweet us at LoveTennisPod, but I believe they're not the most popular team in basketball. Not because they're unpopular, just that no one goes to watch them. Anyway, beside the point. Frances Tiafoe has now made a US Open quarterfinal. Can't take that away from him. It's a pretty big deal. He made the 4th round the last 2 years running, So obviously he knows he can play here. I think in 2020 he lost to Medvedev, and then last year he lost to Felix Auger-Aliassime. So, not losing to bad players. The match against Nadal was weird. I think Nadal served extremely poorly, and I think he pretty much said as much. He in classic Nadal fashion, my colleague Eleanor Crooks of the Press Association said, what made the difference out there? And he said, well, the difference is easy. I played a bad match, and he played a good match. At the end, that's it, no? Now, he went into more detail, of course, but I did think it sort of rather summed things up quite well, that TFO probably played, a 12 out of 10 match, and Nadal played an 8 out of 10 match. And 12 beats 8, quite simply. Nadal said, my shot needs to be better. My understanding of the game, the quality of my shots were not good enough. They were poor, I have to say today, because I was not able to create that much on him. And it's true, and it was interesting because I was in TFO's press conference after his last round, and they started asking about Rafa, of course. And he said, I've got to be aggressive, and players almost always say that. And he said, I've got to make sure that he has to play me, not me play him. And it did feel like that. Like, you weren't looking at what Nadal was doing and how TFO would deal with it, although there was some of that as well. But it was what TFO would do and how Nadal would deal with it. And the reality is he wasn't able to cope. And I think it's a huge, we could look back at this as a huge moment for Frances Tiafoe, for American tennis, and for tennis as a whole. Because he would be, I would love, and I have talked about Frances Tiafoe a lot, I've spoken to him a few times. I've always liked the way he talks about tennis and the way he talks about his own game and the way he talks about other people, the way he carries himself, the way he enjoys being on a tennis court. Not to mention, and I haven't yet, all of his tennis skills. He played brilliantly today. His backhand was amazing. He serves massive, we know that. He moves brilliantly as well, and he is super athletic. There's no denying that. But if he can start to win big matches on a regular basis, he could be a massive superstar for tennis as a whole because of everything that goes with his story. Because, let's not beat around the bush here, because he's a black American, and with Serena Williams retiring, and, people talk about the Tiger Woods effect in golf, and there actually hasn't been much of one. Golf is still a pretty white male and stale sport. Serena Williams has built up tennis to be a more diverse sport. And you only have to walk around the grounds at Flushing Meadows the nights that she played last week to know that there are more black people who feel that tennis is for them. And what's very important about that is not just that those people do feel that tennis is for them, but that they continue to have role models in the game, and that the professional game continues to be a diverse kind of arena. And Frances Tiafoe can be part of that. Now, he's so much more than just a black tennis player. He is brilliant. He's a great talker. He's brilliant to watch. And he's just beaten Rafa Nadal. But I think it's one element that is very encouraging and very positive. Let's talk about Nadal himself a bit. He spoke relatively candidly, although I'm told he spoke with a bit more candour in the Spanish section of the press conference. And I don't speak Spanish. I was talking to Tumani Carriol of The Guardian, who does, and he told me a few things that he said, but he certainly hinted at all the things he went on to say in the Spanish section. Kind of most tellingly, he said, I've been practicing well the week before the tournament, but when the competition started, my level went down. That's the true. The classic Nadal, isn't there? That's the true. For some reason, I don't know, mental issues in terms of a lot of things happened the last couple of months, maybe. And what people maybe don't know is that, they may well know that his wife, Shiska, as I believe she goes by, her name is Maria Francisca, but she shortens it to Shiska, beginning with an X. And I apologise if I pronounced that wrong. She is pregnant with their first child, and she was taken into hospital shortly before the US Open. Really, I think just as a precautionary measure. And I don't know or want to speculate any further on the nature of that illness, because I don't think it's fair. I think the fact that she's gone to hospital is reportable, but it's important to kind of limit maybe the amount of information we throw around about that. I don't think the press has always been right in what they've done there. But anyway, that of course will affect you. Now clearly he still played the US Open, so there was a commitment there, but it would affect you mentally, and I can see how he might have been distracted and a little less focused, and he's going through this for the first time, so he didn't know how he would necessarily react. Anyone who knows anyone, if you've had children, I haven't had children, but many of my close family members have, including my mother, of course, and both of my sisters have had 2 children. And it the first time especially, it's an incredibly stressful time. And you can read all the books you want, but it's so different when it happens to you. And so I don't doubt that Nadal's been through a stressful time. And of course, other people go through this. But that doesn't make it untrue that Nadal is going through this and that he may have been affected by it. He also said, quite interestingly, I need to go back home. I need to fix things, life. Then I don't know when I'm going to come back. I'm going to try to be mentally ready. I'm going to try to be ready mentally. When I feel that I will be ready to compete again, I will be there. Now, he does often say this, and he came into press very quickly after defeat. He was in the room in about 15 minutes. And often players say, I don't know what I'm doing next. I've only just lost. I haven't really thought about it. But equally, most players know, one way or another. Now, the next date in Nadal's diary, as far as I know, is the Laver Cup in London at the end of September. He is due to play alongside Federer and Djokovic and Murray, and it's going to be the sort of tennis social media event of the year. But nevertheless, I'm not convinced, based on what he said there, that he'll be there. Now, there are a few better environments to play in that one doesn't necessarily have to work that hard, because you might only play one singles match and one doubles match. I mean, I think he's going to play doubles with Federer if he's there. I've certainly spoken to a few people who think that's almost certainly going to happen. So you can plan your schedule. You maybe only have to turn up a day or 2 before. It's a limited time in kind of event. So I can see that it would be easier than, going to, Shanghai and playing a 9-day tournament there, albeit 7-day for Rafa. But nevertheless, and actually Shanghai's not happening this year anyway. There's nothing there. But I can see that the Laver Cup might drop off. And actually Alex Corretja, who knows Rafa very well, and he works for Eurosport as a pundit, and he said he can see Rafa playing maybe just 2 or 3 more tournaments this year. You would assume that one of them will be ATP World Tour Finals, where I think he is the only person guaranteed a place at the moment. But what else he plays, especially given that he's kind of carrying at least one injury, this abdominal tear, which he says, well, it's now healed, but he says still kind of bothers him a bit, and there's a few other niggles, as there always are with players. I do wonder whether he might say, well, I'll play World Tour Finals, and I might play one other tournament just to get warm, but otherwise, Australia is the next goal. We shall see, but that was my reading of what he said. In other news today, Cam Norrie was beaten in 3 very one-sided sets. Well, 2 very one-sided sets, and then a briefly even set in the third. Quite frankly, Cam played very badly, and I am a bit disappointed for him, because he made 36 unforced errors, and that's kind of not Cam. I said to him actually afterwards, I said, that was a very un-Cam performance, wasn't it? And he sort of he said, well, no, Rublev played really well, and yeah, I didn't play brilliantly, but I felt pretty good out there. Interestingly, he said he thought he was too relaxed. He said he had too much chill and didn't get himself going enough. And funnily enough, the one time he did get himself going and he played the best point of the match from his perspective was just after he'd smashed a racket. And anyone who watches Cam Norrie knows that he doesn't do that very often. So, yeah, interesting that was the moment that he sort of seemed to turn it around. Whether he learns from that, and he said that he would, I don't know. I mean, that might not mean smashing more rackets, but it might mean maybe, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he takes away from that, because he certainly did look flat, and you sort of wanted him to start geeing up the crowd a bit. I think the crowd are really up for it. When he did play that great point, he really seemed to get to understand what he was doing. But I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of fascinating, really, because most people think Cam Norrie isn't good enough to be at the level he's at, but he is, and therefore he is good enough. And the proof in the pudding will be whether he can beat top 10 players at Grand Slams. And I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying he's yet to do that. So, what does he have to do to lift that? Maybe it's understanding when he's in those ruts and those difficult moments, and understanding how to get himself out of them. What else do we have to do? We had Jannik Sinner going 5 sets with Ilya Ivashka, whose run at the US Open is finally over. I mean, Sinner got over the line in 3 hours, 48 minutes. He was never behind in the match, if that makes sense, because he took the first set and then lost the second. He took the third set and then lost the fourth, and eventually triumphed in 5 sets. It was a pretty ding-dong match. I think they were definitely double figures breaks of serve, but I'm not quite sure. Here we go. 8 plus 12. I mean, is that 20 breaks of serve, I believe, which is pretty wild, even in a 5-set match. To the extent that I'm having to double check that stat by going through it game by game, and yeah, I think that is right. Jannik Sinner needs to start winning those matches in straight sets again, like he used to, because he is going to go into a quarterfinal with a lot of sets under his belt that the best players in the world do not have under their belt. He played 5 sets in the first round, he played 4 sets in the third round, and now 5 in the fourth. And when he plays either Cilic or Alcaraz, who, as I say, are in a 5th set, well, they might not be as fresh. But, nevertheless, Sinner would like to have a lot more in his legs than however many extra sets that is. He would look at those opponents and probably think, I should have beaten them more in straight sets. Daniel Altmaier should not be taking me to 5 sets. Ilya Ivashka should not be taking me to 5 sets. So, just to fill you in the other results from today, Jess Pegula beat Petra Kvitova. She's in straight sets. She's through to the quarterfinals, along with Arina Sabalenka, who needed all 3 to beat Danielle Collins. Karolina Pliskova came through a very tight one with Victoria Azarenka. She lost the first set, and then the second went to a tiebreak, in which she actually led 6-2 and spurned 4 set points, but did eventually... Sorry, that's an alarm reminding me to do this podcast. So, good one. I won't edit that out because, as you know, these are raw, and you get everything that you get everything. You get all of it. Even me losing my train of thought because the alarm reminding you to do something I'm currently doing has gone off. What else? Oh, Iga Świątek, Jules Niemeyer. I wanted to talk about this match very briefly. World number 1 Iga Świątek has not been perfect. She dropped the first set, 6-2, to the world number 108, Jules Niemeyer, who has one of the biggest serves in the game. I think she hit the second fastest serve in the entire tournament at French Open, even though I'm not convinced she played main draw. I think she may just have played qualifying. But she's a dangerous player, and she took the first set and then got herself a break-up in the second as well. And just her level completely abandoned her. But for those first, 11 games, she looked like she was going to pull off an upset. And Świątek was struggling, I think, a bit in the heat and the humidity. It was really humid today, like 75% humidity. And Niemeyer took advantage of it. But, yeah, her level just completely abandoned her after that. She got 2-1 up in the second, and after that only won 2 more games as Świątek came roaring back. Świątek would admit she didn't play her best. I think she'd admit she hasn't played her best. She doesn't particularly like New York. She doesn't seem to like the surface. Admittedly, that was the first set she dropped, but I don't think she's been completely immaculate, to be honest. I apologise for the yawn, but it is 2 a.m. here. She's going to play Jesper Gula in the quarterfinal. Jesper Gula is in really good form. Will obviously have a home crowd behind her. I think that's a really dangerous match for her. And I would not be surprised to see Pegula winning that when they play on, Wednesday as it will be. Interesting to note that Świątek's barely been on Ash. She's played once on Ash, top seed in the women's draw. She's been Louis Armstrong 3 times. I don't know what to make of that. I think it's a bit rubbish. I think they should feel duty bound to put her on Ash at least once more, but this is probably a reason I don't run these tournaments. Okay, so that was today. Let's look back a bit with some hindsight on Sunday, where the main result, and, not to put a dampener on Ayla Tomlanović's brilliant win over Ludmila Samsonova, where she played an 18-minute, 31-point game at 4-5, saving, I think, 6 set points in the first. And then it went to a tiebreak that she won 10-8, and she won the second set 6-1, sorry. And not also to brush past Coco Gauff versus Zhang Shui, which I recommend you find the highlights on YouTube, because it's basically just one big highlight reel. You can watch the whole match, to be honest. It was brilliant. But the reality is that the biggest story from that night was Nick Kyrgios beating Daniil Medvedev. And I've written so many notes about this match, and I don't know if I've written them all in copy, but it was fascinating on so many levels. Kyrgios and Medvedev are both eccentrics, but in completely different ways. They're both people that have made the crowd boo them relentlessly, but in completely different ways. And they are also both brilliant entertainers in completely different ways. And I hope that this is a match we will see a lot of times at serious levels of Grand Slams. Because Nick Kyrgios, and let's not forget this is the same Nick Kyrgios who has a domestic assault charge that he has to answer for later this year, hanging over him. He's innocent until proven guilty, but it's important to mention that. But on a tennis court, he is one of the most electrifying people in the world. He is fabulous to watch. He has so many skills. He has now got to a point in his life where he's able to focus, and even the outbursts that he has tend to be brief and at specific moments. He is able to produce some of his best tennis, and that is brilliant to watch. And when you put him up against Daniil Medvedev, a guy who can do so many different things, the defending champion, the world number 1, you're almost always going to get fireworks, I think. And there were so many fireworks on Sunday night in so many different ways. I mean, Daniil Medvedev is a great, what I would call shithouse, and Kyrgios out shithoused him, quite frankly. I think he got in Medvedev's head. He frustrated him. He de-rhythmed him as well, to an extent. The biggest thing for me, the two biggest things, A, the Kyrgios backhand, which I've always said is one of the most underrated shots in tennis, was brilliant. And he took on the Medvedev second serve with it, and Medvedev kept floating short second serves into his backhand, and Kyrgios kept whacking them down the line for a clean winner. And the other thing was that Medvedev just looked underpowered. He would put his all into a shot, and Kyrgios would be up on the baseline, taking it on the rise and hitting a winner. And that's pretty worrying for Medvedev. He did alter his baseline position, and he got deeper and deeper as the match went on return of serve, but if you're going to play like that, you also need to be able to hit through from a little bit deeper than others, or find a way to get yourself further up the court again. And I think he just couldn't do that. As the match went on, the average rally length went down and down. I think it was 4.2 in the first set. I think in the fourth set it was something like 2.9. And Medvedev just ran out of answers, quite frankly. And Kyrgios didn't. He gets in your head, and you mustn't let him. That's the reality of it. And he's going to go play Karen Khachanov, who I don't think he'll beat him, but I suppose he's got as much of a chance as anyone. It's to the point now where if Kyrgios keeps it together for long enough, he wins. And he now looks like he can keep it together. So, who is going to beat him? You know, entries on a postcard, please. Let me know at LoveTennisPod on Twitter. Who is going to stop Nick Kyrgios winning this US Open title? Because I'm not. I have a few ideas. I think Carlos Alcaraz can. I think Casper Ruud might be able to. But I don't have many other answers beyond that. And that's a pretty interesting state of affairs, in my opinion. That's probably all I've got time for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will try and do some talking after the quarterfinals, which are starting tomorrow or today, since you're almost certainly listening to this on Tuesday. A fascinating US Open second week awaits.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Next time someone needs to send you money, tell them to use Zelle. With Zelle, the money goes straight into your bank account, and it typically only takes minutes between enrolled users. And even if the sender uses a different U.S. bank, it still works. Plus, Zelle is already in over 1,600 banking apps, so you probably won't have to download another one. By the way, make sure the sender has your correct U.S. mobile number or email address, so the money goes to the right place. Look for Zelle in your banking app today.